You guys asked for a deep dive into Google DeepMind's AlphaChip, and we are so here for it. We're talking articles, research, even some skeptical takes to get you the full picture.
Yeah, it's really something, isn't it? AI designing the brains of our computers.
Right. I mean, I remember reading that student blogger, Nishant, he called it like stumbling onto a sci-fi movie set, but in real life.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I saw that too.
And it is kind of like that, right?
It is pretty wild. Yeah. Especially when you think about where chip design is right now.
You mean like how insanely tiny those transistors are getting?
Exactly. Like, it's incredible how many they can cram onto a chip the size of, well, your fingernail.
It's mind-blowing, but...
But it's getting harder, way harder. That's the thing.
Right. Like at some point, you hit a wall.
Yeah. And Moore's Law, you know, that whole doubling computing power every 2 years thing. Right. That's been the engine of the industry, but it's getting tougher to keep up.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Imagine designing a city, right? But every year, you got to double the population. Every single year.
Okay, yeah.
But the city limits, they stay the same. You see the problem.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you'd be like out of space immediately.
Exactly. That's kind of what chip designers are dealing with. Space, power, heat, it all adds up.
Yeah.
And that's where AI, specifically something like AlphaChip, that's where it comes in.
Okay, so back up a sec. For those who maybe they missed an episode, what exactly, like at its core, what is AlphaChip doing? Designing the chips themselves?
That's the short version, yeah. It's using, get ready for it, an edge-based graph neural network, which, yeah, sounds like a mouthful.
It does.
But think of it like a city map.
Right.
The buildings, those are your processing units, and the roads are all the connections between them. AlphaChip looks at this map, this whole network, and figures out the best, most efficient layout for all those components.
Interesting. So it's like it's looking at the whole picture, not just individual parts.
Exactly. And it's doing it in a way that would take humans, well, an impractical amount of time to figure out.
Right. Because there are, what, billions of these transistors now?
Billions, yeah. And it's only getting more complex.
Oh, so this AlphaChip thing, is it like trial and error? How is it even learning to do this?
Good question. It's called reinforcement learning. Basically, imagine like training a dog. Give it a treat when it does something good. AlphaChip tries out a design. And if it's better than the last one, faster, less energy, whatever the goal is, it gets a reward. It's churning through design after design, learning with each attempt way faster than any human could.
So it's not just copying what humans do, it's coming up with its own solutions.
Right. And often those solutions, they're actually better than what we humans come up with, which is
Been freaky, right?
a little bit, yeah, but also super exciting.
So how real is this, though? I mean, are we talking like labs and research papers, or is AlphaChip actually out there designing chips in the wild?
Oh, it's out there, and it's already making waves. One of the coolest examples, Google's using it for their tensor processing units.
For TPUs.
Those are the chips specifically designed for AI stuff, like the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
AlphaChip, it's a big part of how they're designed.
Hold on. So those things we take for granted now, like voice assistants or when your phone like automatically sorts your photos, that's using chips designed by AI already.
It's happening, yeah. Kind of bends your brain a little, doesn't it?
Just a tad. And it's not just Google, right? Didn't I read something about MediaTek using this too?
You did. MediaTek, they're huge in the smartphone world.
Yeah.
Lots of those Dimensity 5G chips, those are using AlphaChip designs too.
So it's already in our pockets, basically.
Pretty much. And it's just the beginning, really. I mean, when Google publishes research like this, it sends ripples. Other companies, they see which way the wind's blowing.
Right, like nobody wants to be left behind.
Exactly. You've got NVIDIA, AMD, even Apple. They're all pouring resources into AI design tools. Each one's got their own spin on it, their own secret sauce, but the general idea is the same.
It's like an AI arms race, kind of.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Pretty exciting to watch, honestly. Speaking of watching, we got to talk about those visualizations.
No, yeah. Those were cool.
Yeah.
The heat maps, right. I loved those.
Yeah.
What were we seeing there again, exactly?
It's like getting a peek inside AlphaChip's head, you know? Imagine you could see what a human engineer focuses on when they're designing a chip. Which parts they tinker with the most, where they hit roadblocks, that kind of thing.
Right.
These heat maps, that's what they show us. But for AlphaChip, where it's spending its time, where it's finding elegant solutions, it's all right there.
It's like AI thought bubbles, almost.
Yeah, kind of. But not everyone's buying into the hype, you know. There's been some pushback, too.
Really? Like, what? They think AlphaChip's not all it's cracked up to be.
Some researchers, yeah, they're saying, hold on, let's not get ahead of ourselves. They think the tests, the benchmarks they use to show off AlphaChip, those might have been, well, Too easy.
Too easy.
Right, like you had aced those tests. But real-world chip design, it's way messier. More constraints, more curveballs thrown at you.
So the question is, can AlphaChip hack it when things get really rough, really complex?
Exactly. And in some of those tougher scenarios, when you really put it through the ringer, some researchers found that the old-school methods, they actually still hold up pretty well.
Old school, like what?
So there's this thing called simulated annealing. It's a way to find, like, the best solution in these really complex systems. And sometimes it still beats AlphaChip, especially when you up the difficulty level.
Wow, so it's not like AlphaChip just like blows everything else out of the water.
Not quite. It's important to remember, like, this is all still evolving so fast. AlphaChip's learning, it's getting better, but it's got limitations, like that grid-based system we were talking about before.
Oh, right, because it's like forcing those components into a grid, even if that's not the most, efficient way to do it.
Exactly. It makes things easier for AlphaChip to manage, but it's also a constraint, especially when you've got tons of tiny little components.
Yeah, like trying to fit puzzle pieces into a grid, even if they naturally want to go in a different shape.
And that's exactly what we saw in that IBM benchmark test. Remember that image? You could see how that grid was forcing some stuff to be further apart than it ideally should have been. Not ideal for efficiency.
Right. So which is it then? Is AI going to replace human chip designers or not? What's the story? So it's less about like humans are obsolete and more about giving them a superpowered sidekick.
Right. That's the cool part.
Ah.
Imagine AI helping designers explore like way more options, way faster. We're talking faster development, better chips, and like totally new breakthroughs in those areas that are a pain for humans to design.
Like quantum computing. I know Nishant, that student blogger, he was all over that.
Yeah, and neuromorphic computing, which is like, whoa, a whole other rabbit hole.
Right. Like we might need AI to even unlock those next-gen computers. Wild.
Total mind bend. But it shows you this isn't just about like a slightly faster smartphone next year.
Right.
AI-driven design, it could change everything. Medicine, energy, even like space exploration.
Okay, so big picture time. If AI is making the chips that power AI, where does it even stop? It's like what Nishant said. What haven't we even thought of yet?
That's the million-dollar question, right? And the honest answer is we don't know. Nobody does.
That's kind of scary, but also exciting.
It's both, for sure. We're in uncharted territory, pushing the limits. What is intelligence? What is creativity? Like, those questions get tangled up in all this.
It's almost philosophical, you know?
Totally. We're not just building gadgets. We're shaping the future, literally.
And that future, it's being shaped by people like you listening right now. The questions you ask, the problems you're, like, obsessed with solving, that's the fuel.
Exactly. So as we wrap up this deep dive on AlphaChip and where AI design's headed,
what's your role going to be? That's the question we'll leave you with. What's the next big breakthrough, and will you be the one to make it happen? Because out there in that unknown space, that's where the really cool stuff is waiting. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.